This episode is about camels in Texas, an extraordinary experiment. In the 1880s, a wild menace haunted the Arizona Territory. It was known as the Red Ghost, and its legend grew as it roamed the high country. It trampled a woman to death in 1883. It was rumored to stand 30 feet tall. A cowboy once tried to rope the ghost, but it turned and charged his mount, nearly killing them both. One man chased it, then claimed it disappeared right before his eyes. Another swore it devoured a grizzly bear. The eyewitnesses said it was a devilish-looking creature, strapped on the back of some strange-looking beast. Months after the first attacks, a group of miners spotted the ghost along the VITAE River. They took aim at the creature. When it fled their gunfire, something shook loose and landed on the ground. The miners approached the spot where it fell. They saw a human skull lying in the dirt. Bits of skin and hair still stuck to bone. Several years later, a rancher near Eagle Creek spotted a feral, red-haired camel grazing in his tomato patch. The man grabbed his rifle, then shot and killed the animal. The ghost's reign of terror was over. News spread back to the East Coast, where the New York Sun published a colorful report about the red ghost's demise. The report said, quote, "When the rancher went out to examine the dead beast, he found strips of rawhide wound and twisted all over his back, his shoulders, and even under his tail. Something or someone was once lashed onto the camel." End quote. Well, that story has a beginning in Texas in the 1850s. First, I want to talk a little bit about the territory in the American Southwest. In 1845, Texas became a state, adding a tremendous amount of land to the United States. If you look at the map on the left, you can see the dark outline of Texas, which included a big chunk out of New Mexico, some out of Oklahoma, a little square off of Kansas, through Colorado and up into Wyoming. That was considered Texas. That was a lot of territory. Well, then in 1848, there was the Mexican-American War, which the Americans won, and with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the United States gained even more territory. Again, looking at the map on the left, you can see that it included what is now New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, California. All of that area had belonged to Mexico, but by winning the war, the United States gained all of that territory. Now, all of this territory was pretty much uninhabited, except, of course, for nomadic Indians. Apache, Comanche were the largest groups that lived in that area. But this expansion of land for the United States gave the government a big headache because it came along with problems. If you look at the map on the right, and it shows Texas, the borders that we now recognize as Texas, you can see the line of forts. That is central and towards the east part of Texas. And all of the area to the west, as far as Anglo-Americans, it's uninhabited, very few trails, very few people. Anglo-Americans haven't even crossed that area. So it's wild, rugged, uninhabited land. So problems that came with expansion were manyfold. There was the need for communication and transportation. I mean, all this land that was gained had to be protected and had to be, what they wanted was to connect the east to the west. Now with all of this added territory, it's possible. California became a state in 1850, just 2 years after the end of the Mexican-American War, when that area became part of the United States. So California's a state, Texas a state. A lot of land, a lot of expanse in between those two states. So there were problems of communication and transportation. How are we going to, there were no railroads yet. Those won't come about for almost a decade. So there's a need to be able to cross that area in order to communicate, to send mail, to send news, to transport people and items across that area. So that's a problem because this area was exposed and dangerous. And by that, I mean, it was exposed to raids by Indians, by Indian attacks, close to Mexico. So problems of potential invasions by Mexicans. It was dangerous because there are no Anglo-American forts or settlements. So it's wide open spaces with no protection. So it's exposed and dangerous territory. It's mountainous. A big part of it was mountainous. Dry, with little grass or water to feed pack animals or horses for transportation. The area needed to be guarded. I mean, it's American territory. The government has got to make sure that it's secure. So there are political and military reasons for solving these problems. How are they going to cross that land? How are they going to cross that dangerous, mountainous, dry area to connect the United States? I have at the bottom of this slide some images of attempts to try to cross the area. On the far left, those are surveyors looking over the land, trying to decide on routes, possible routes for crossing the area. The image there in the middle is of mules and horses loaded down with food supplies, equipment, all the things they would need to carry with them if they're going to try to cross the area and make roads or trails or paths or whatever they're going to do. And then on the far right is a mule train carrying packs up the mountains. So these images give us an idea of the kind of problems that are facing the military, who's going to be concerned about providing means to cross this expanse of land. On the next slide, I have proposals for solving the problem. Okay? There was a man, a military Major George H. Crossman, who had worked with the military in Florida. And Florida there wasn't much Anglo-American settlement in Florida at the time. A lot of Seminole Indians, some Spanish. So Crossman was with the military, and he was dealing with problems of how to cross that land to carry supplies and equipment and so forth. So he began researching and studying the use of camels. By 1836, he presents to the Secretary of War, to the Department of War, the idea of using camels, the military using camels. Well, Secretary of War Jefferson Davis, in 1850, was actually, even before he became Secretary of War, he had heard of Crossman's suggestion, and he had done his own study, his own research. And so once he becomes Secretary of War, he's totally on board with this idea of experimenting with camels to use in the far west. The benefits of using camels was that they can go further and longer with little food or water, and they can carry heavier loads than horses or mules, and they do well in hot weather. Finally, Davis gets it through Congress, and Congress agrees to send for camels. So Major H.C. Wayne, whose image is there on the left, was sent to the Middle East in 1855. Now, Congress had appropriated $30,000 for this experiment. So Wayne leaves on the USS Supply ship, which I have an image of that in the middle there. And he goes to the Middle East and he visits different areas, Egypt, the Barbary Coast, and he manages to get together 34 camels. The image there on the right is an image that was drawn by a man who was with Wayne on this expedition. And they're loading up one of the camels, a Bactrian camel. There's two types of camels. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this video talking about the different types of camels and all the benefits, all the information about camels, but that image gives you an idea of Navy men loading up these camels to take them to Texas. So May of 1856, Indianola, Texas was an important port in Texas at that time. And the people who knew about what was coming were gathered there in Indianola to see the amazing entrance of camels into Texas. This was a military experiment. I have some images here. All of these images are from resources about these camels in Texas. So on the left, there's an example of camels and mules and military making their way over the mountains. On the right, at the top, another image of Texans with the camels and the mules and the horses. The bottom image, when horses and mules are crossing the area, once they scent water, they can smell water, they make a rush for the source of the water, as you can see in that image, kind of in the middle on the bottom of the slide. But the camels, they're not excited at all. You can tell they're kind of in the background. They don't need water yet. So another image about camels in Texas. On the next slide, I have some maps and a couple more images. On the right is a map of the Texas frontier, 1852 to 1861. You can see that the line of forts has extended now further west. The map on the left at the top shows, if you can see there, the dotted line, and right below that it says Beale's Crossing. Beale, which was a military officer, led this experiment of trying to cross from Fort Defiance in Texas to California with these camels. His report on this is very interesting and exciting. On the bottom, you can see a couple of images of the camels being used in crossing that frontier area. Now, this is just a taste of what is to come. If you want to know the rest of the story, check out my podcast on iTunes or Spotify at History Bites, and I'll give you a lot more information about camels, about the use of camels in Texas, and how that experiment worked. See you then.